Hello everybody, welcome to this week's episode of The County Seat. We have a very special show for you today. We are going to be talking about the relationship of the federal government and the state and local governments throughout the show. A little bit later in the program, we'll be talking about the actual ownership of federal lands and the impacts it has on the counties and the state, and whether that ownership is correct or not. And our guest on our roundtable will be Senator Mike Lee. In the first part of the show, we are going to talk about roads. Now, I'm along a street in Salt Lake City, Utah. When you're on the streets of a city, pretty obvious who owns the street. It's the city. When you get a parking ticket, that's who you pay, the city. The city maintains it. They set the ordinances for travel upon it. Pretty clear cut. But the further you move away from the city, when you get into the counties and rural Utah, ownership of those roads becomes a lot more contentious. Now, historically, under RS2477, which we've discussed many times on this program, ownership of a road built automatically became county property or the agency that built the road. However, after they passed FLPMA in 1976, all new roads were supposed to become property of the federal government, and you just leased them. Well, that has led to several court battles, and it's been fairly ugly for the last 15 or 20 years. Right now, they are trying a new program in Iron County where they can move the debate about ownership of the road out of the courtroom and into the county courthouse to see if they can solve the problem. Here with the story is Terry Wood.
RS2477. Probably doesn't mean much to you, does it? Well, if you've ever driven a dirt road, you're more familiar with RS2477 than you probably realize. The RS actually stands for Revised Statute, and it was enacted by the United States Congress back in 1866. It was to encourage settlers to move west by making access easier through the creation of roads. Its entire text is one sentence. The right-of-way for the construction of highways across public lands not otherwise reserved for public purposes is hereby granted. That simple phrase has led to plenty of controversy here in Utah between county governments and federal agencies as to who has jurisdiction over certain roads that cross federal lands and who has the right to close those roads. Lawsuits have been filed in many cases and gone through decisions and appeals in district court. One Utah county, though, has decided to take a different approach to the issue. And while it may not work for all counties, it potentially could change the RS2477 issue across the board.
A huge majority of these roads, probably close to 90%, are also mapped on vintage USGS maps that were done prior to 1976. All the makings are there for the parties. By that I mean BLM, the county, the state, various stakeholders to come together and say, why do we need to sue over these? They're open. They're obvious. Can't we find a way to negotiate a resolution as opposed to an expensive mile-by-mile lawsuit? That's basically the premise behind what we call the Iron County pilot process. It's a threat to some because for so many years now, and maybe decades, we've been in an adversarial mode with the BLM and with some of the groups who oppose us. We're having to get used to the idea of talking to them.
The Iron County pilot process is a plan to get all interested parties together in a project that is open and transparent, addresses all interests, and is grounded in reasonable consensus on all the issues. Part of the plan is to prove that agreement is in fact possible in many of the RS2477 cases, and that such agreement is beneficial to everyone involved. The pilot program will first focus on non-controversial roads and move up from there, only bringing the court system into the equation after consensus has been reached.
Everything's just agreed on, down to which road will be identified, the length, the width, everything.
While the Iron County process likely would be far more difficult in counties where many of the roads are highly contentious, in other places this approach could put an end to the courtroom battles and close the book on at least some of the RS2477 issues now facing Utah. While the Bureau of Land Management has already responded favorably to the idea, and are all ready to move forward, they are not the only stakeholder involved.
There are a lot of people on both sides of the issue. Frankly, they're invested in keeping it as an ongoing controversy. Thawing out those old positions is difficult, and it may not be successful. Our attitude is we're going to keep taking one step at a time on this until we either reach the courthouse steps or we step on a landmine and the whole thing blows up. And I may be coming back in 6 months saying, yep, we did it, or saying, boy, that sure did not work. So stay tuned.
Only time will tell which scenario is more likely. For the county seat, I'm Terry Wood.
One interesting fact about the Iron County project is that when the Department of Interior and the state decided to enter into this trial program to see if they could resolve the RS2477 issues, no RS2477 roads had successfully been litigated in court with ownership going to the counties. Since they've started the process, there have been more than one case that have now come to the courts and have ruled in favor of county ownership of RS2477. That could change the dynamic of how this program goes forward in the future. Well, stay with us on the county seat. When we come back, we will be shifting our attention to ownership of not roads but federal lands within the boundaries of the state. Are the holdings of the federal government truly constitutional? That'll be our topic when we come back.
What is play? Is it culture? Is it adventure? Is it...
It's a destination.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
That's correct.
Cedar City and Bryan Head, in the heart of Utah's most epic landscapes. Beauty, culture, adventure. It's time you came out to play. Cedar City, Utah, where play is the thing. You haven't forgotten how to play. It's just that you haven't been to the right place yet.
Almost 45% of the oil produced in Utah, 7.8 million barrels, comes from Duchesne County. That oil feeds our state economy, provides job growth, and supports local business. Here in Duchesne County, we're working to make Utah an economic, cultural, and technological leader. Whether you're here for business or pleasure, Duchesne County will welcome you with open arms and invite you to explore all the beauty of the Uinta Mountains. Duchesne County, close enough for business, far enough to get away.
The State of Utah School and Institutional Trust Lands Administration. SITLA manages 3.5 million acres of Utah lands with the express purpose of furthering the education of Utah students while promoting local industry, oil and gas, even residential development, all at the same time. Through the careful use of trust lands, we distributed more than $22 million to Utah schools last year. The State of Utah School and Institutional Trust Lands Administration, building the state's permanent school fund.